In the U.S., the number of people filing new jobless claims jumped unexpectedly last week, while those continuing to receive benefits hit a 10th straight record high. Both figures indicate that the labor market remains weak in the U.S. The Labor Department said this morning that initial claims for unemployment insurance rose to a seasonally adjusted 669,000 from the previous week's revised figure of 657,000. That total was above analysts' expectations and the highest in more than 26 years. You'll recall that the unemployment figures are adjusted 3 times until the final figure is finally determined. However, based on the second revision, the tally of laid-off workers claiming benefits for more than a week rose 161,000. This is up to 5.73 million. This sets a record for the 10th straight week. Now, the other 2 glimmers of hope. In Germany, German auto sales shot up by 40% during the month of March compared with the same month last year. The reasons are apparently attributable to a government subsidy as well as the larger number of business days in the month of March. That's according to the German Automobile Federation in a statement that was released this morning in Berlin. A little bit further to the west, United Kingdom home prices unexpectedly rose 0.9% during the month of March. This is their first gain since October of 2007. The increase followed a 1.9% decrease in prices during the month of February. The annual rate of decline of prices slowed to 15.7% from 17.6% in February. That's good news. KPMG, the auditor, has been sued for at least $1 billion today by creditors of New Century Financial, the second largest seller of subprime loans in the U.S. The lawsuits claim that KPMG audits of New Century, which collapsed in April of 2007, were recklessly and grossly negligent. New Century's bankruptcy forced banks and investors to take losses on the mortgage-backed securities they'd bought from the lender, fueling the credit crisis that ended up enveloping financial markets around the world. Well, if that's the ramifications of your actions, you're in big trouble. Lawyers for a trustee who represents the creditors filed lawsuits against KPMG. The suits accused KPMG U.S. of signing off, quote, materially misstated financial statements and alleged that the parent company was responsible for the severely reckless and grossly negligent activities of the U.S. business that signed off on the materially misstated financial statements. The claims also accused KPMG of flouting tougher laws on independence of auditors brought in the U.S. after Enron's 2001 collapse. As New Century's auditor, KPMG failed its public watchdog duties, said the case or the lawsuit. New Century was set up in '96 and by '06 was the second biggest originator of subprime mortgages. In the United States this morning, we woke up to images of federal agents, federal marshals seizing Bernard Madoff's palatial 5-bedroom estate down in Palm Beach, also the seizure of his yacht in Florida. There's some discussion that, in fact, his mansion in France will be seized, as ultimately will his penthouse on Park Avenue, New York. Well, yesterday, Secretary of State of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, William Galvin, sued the Fairfield Greenwich Group. The Fairfield Greenwich Group is one of the so-called feeder funds, which steered investors to Madoff's investment securities company. Mr. Galvin alleged that Fairfield defrauded customers, including those in Massachusetts, by leading them to believe it had thoroughly examined Madoff's operations and investment strategy. Listen to this. Fairfield Greenwich Century funds placed about 95% of their total assets of $7.2 billion with Madoff, according to the Secretary of State of the Commonwealth, without doing due diligence. The Commonwealth alleges, among other things, that Fairfield did not question Madoff's unusual trading reports or his failure to hire an outside firm to handle record-keeping on the money entrusted to his firm. According to a spokesperson for Fairfield, they denied the state's allegations. They said that Fairfield conducted vigorous and robust monitoring on an ongoing basis of Madoff's investments. However, the Secretary of State of Massachusetts detailed the 2005 conversation in which Madoff coached Fairfield officials on how to respond to questions from the Securities and Exchange Commission. According to a transcript of the phone call between Madoff and two Fairfield executives, one of whom is the son-in-law of the firm's founder, Madoff at the beginning of the conversation said, obviously, okay, first of all, this conversation never took place, right? Yes, Bernie, of course. The Fairfield executive agreed. Madoff then went on to discuss matters related to the relationship between Fairfield Greenwich and Madoff's firm, apparently to make sure that Fairfield's story was the same as his own. Later in the discussion, he tells Fairfield Greenwich to be vague in responding to the SEC on certain interactions. Quote, you don't have to be exact on this stuff because it's not, no one pays attention to these types of things, or who calls or who doesn't or who remembers who calls. In December, Fairfield Greenwich said that it was shocked and appalled by the Madoff scandal and had no knowledge of the fraud. The firm had invested with Madoff for 20 years. Fairfield, as is typical with hedge funds, charged its customers the customary hedge fund fees, 1% of all assets plus 20% of investment profits. They reaped about $100 million a year on accounts invested with Madoff, according to the complaint. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts is seeking restitution, disgorgement of fees, and a fine from Fairfield Greenwich. Now, let's pull this picture up. In the center is Walter Noel. To his left is his wife. To his right and in front of him are his 5 daughters. 15 years ago, when the Noels were raking in the money from Bernard Madoff's investment funds, they moved out to Long Island and began to infiltrate Long Island blue blood society. They were regarded as outsiders and interlopers in the society pages because they tried too hard. The Noel girls, 3 of them, married people who subsequently gained employment at Fairfield Greenwich, making as high as $45 million a year in salaries. Mr. Noel, you have many things to answer for. You collected money, lots and lots of money, and turned it over to Bernie Madoff without even checking, and managed to collect fees of $100 million a year on that money for simply mailing checks to Mr. Madoff. We will be following this story. We like to see things like this. The stock market remains up, about 280 points now. If there's any breaking news, we'll tell you. Tomorrow, we'll be jointly doing the news. Myself and my producer, Frank Mazzio, will be appearing in front of the cameras as well. And we'll do a 2-person newscast. So that'll be on Friday. It will be a treat to look forward to. Thank you for watching and have a good day.